Thanks everybody for coming to check out Workshop on Pigs. My name is Matt McDermott. Like Evan said, I'm the owner operator of Alluvial Farms, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get that queued up. I have a PowerPoint presentation with some slides that hopefully walk through the evolution of alluvial, the production systems, the marketing and sales outlets, our land in general, how we started Alluvial Farms, the partnerships that we leveraged to start Alluvial Farms, and just an overall evolution of the business to show you some ideas about starting a small hog operation, and hopefully to spur some questions and thoughts that we can discuss throughout the presentation, as well as at the end. So thanks again, and I'll just dive in here, get this started. So just to locate ourselves amidst the folks, we're north of California quite a ways. We're up in Everson, Washington. So we're about 2 hours north of Seattle and about 20 miles east of the I-5 and the community of Bellingham, which would be a community of about 100,000 people in Bellingham. It's got a university, a pretty eclectic community, really supportive of the local food scene, and makes it a very supportive community to have a small farm business. But the I-5 corridor also offers a lot of opportunities to sell to some other outlets in the larger cities like Seattle, Tacoma, Everett, that are just south of us. Whatcom County is historically a dairy community, and over the last 40 or 50 years, a lot of those small dairies have sold out, and so is predominantly a berry growing county at this point, both blueberries and raspberries, as well as seed potato production. So those are the large agricultural industries in the community, and there are a smattering of smaller producers, organic vegetable producers, some small meat producers as well. But the big agricultural component in the county is berries, seed potato, and to a lesser degree now, dairy is still part of it, which is all very important to have that critical mass of agriculture, both for equipment, service and maintenance, and sharing and exchange of information, and just having a critical mass of agricultural activity happening within the county that allows all sorts of enterprises to be a part of it. So while there's maybe one other small hog operation in the county, where Alluvial is by far the largest, and it's offered an opportunity to set ourselves apart from some of the others. So the business was founded in 2015 and rented acreage for 3 years before a parcel was acquired. And on the left here is Merle Foster. He was very generous in opening his doors and his fields to Alluvial Farms in order for us to get our start. And he became a wonderful mentor as well, both for animal husbandry and land management, as well as machinery skills. Just a really great mentor to have. And I feel like that's an important component of a new business getting started, is to identify mentors in the community that can help support you. So for this relationship in particular, what was so important was that Merle was raising animals. He raises beef as well as dairy goats, and he had experience with hogs. So he was familiar with the challenges of raising hogs outside and just what it entailed in general, how hard they could be on the ground and the potential that they could get out, and all these things that a livestock producer, a new livestock producer, might be still naive to. And Merle understood all of these things, was very patient with it all, and rented acreage to us so that we could start our outdoor operation. So here on the right, we have some early huts that we used, and the 2-strand polywire that we used and continue to use, and some animals that are out on some grain that we grew at his place. After a couple years of establishing the business very slowly, starting, I think, that first year with just 10 hogs, and selling, buying piglets, raising them up, harvesting in the fall, and selling them primarily direct to consumers, wholes, halves, and quarters. We did that for a few years and got our numbers up to maybe 50, put a business plan together, saved up our nickels, and acquired a 45-acre parcel that had been farmed in corn for many years and berries in the 90s. There was no infrastructure on the parcel, just an agricultural well at the far end that didn't have power to it and was operated just off of a generator. It's a gentle sloping piece of ground, and it's well drained, and that has been instrumental in our operation. West of the Cascades, way up north here, we get a lot of precipitation in the winter months, October through April. It rains a lot, it doesn't freeze all that much, and so it can get really muddy. And for an outdoor operation, well-drained ground is pretty important, and even in the shoulder seasons becomes really, really key. There's some lower ground in the county that's better suited for vegetable production or berry production, but for a livestock operation, well-drained ground is super important. So it's at the base of Sumas Mountain, which we can see the foothills right here, and it's got this thread of Dale Creek is the northern boundary, and it has 3 different soil types and spills to the west. So lots of sun exposure and a couple different soil options for moving the animals around. The land acquisition was a partnership. There was a USDA FSA farm ownership loan that was a large component of the acquisition, and as well as the Whatcom Land Trust. And the Whatcom Land Trust was engaged early on in the search for land, and the pitch was made that Alluvial was interested in trying to balance preservation, conservation with production agriculture, and the Land Trust is interested in that balance of critical areas with agriculture, and saw Alluvial's vision as an opportunity to team up. So the area along Dale Creek here is a historical salmon-bearing stream, which the previous landowners had farmed up to that creek, right to the creek's edge, and the Land Trust was interested in a conservation easement along that half-mile stretch of Dale Creek on the farm property. And it was predicated on the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, the CREP program that's active in our county, establishing a riparian zone, a replanted riparian zone 180 feet off of that high water mark on the creek, that was replanted into native trees and shrubs and became a 10-acre forest, or is in the process of becoming a 10-acre forest. And once that was put into place, the Land Trust came and purchased a conservation easement on that says in perpetuity that 10 acres is not to be farmed or developed. It's just meant to be a preserved riparian zone for the betterment of the ecosystem services. So the land trust came in at the time of the property purchase with a bridge loan. We had outlined a lot of the nuts and bolts of this arrangement prior to it, and they provided a bridge loan for what the 10 acres were appraised at that time. And Alluvial had 3 years to implement and replant that 10-acre space. And then those 10 acres were again appraised, and essentially that bridge loan that was provided at the time of sale was forgiven or purchased, so to speak, as a conservation easement has written on the deed now. And so if I sell alluvial, that easement stays in perpetuity with the next owners. So anyway, that was a huge component of the land acquisition, the partnership, and I think just setting up the narrative of Alluvial Farms and its interest in trying to balance production agriculture with conservation, land conservation. So here's the farm map, and this was put together by the Conservation District, and we can see the purple thatched area there is the 10-acre CREP buffer and conservation easement. And then the other numbered squares, 1 through 8, are 1-acre paddocks that we use in the early spring and late fall. And sometimes in the winter, number 1 and number 2 become sacrifice areas. And then the lower section on the left, the 9A, B, C, and D, are deeper soils and better suited to grain and legume production. So that's a 20-acre field down there, and historically that's what we've used that for, is annual grain and or legume production, and then rotate the animals on to that after it's combined and after we have picked up straw bales. This small square straw bales are picked up in July, August, and then we move animals down onto that. And you can see the 3 orange lines that run up and down there delineate the different soil types. So that hail, silt, loam, much deeper soil. Then in the center here, we've got the clipper silt loam, which has some gravel in it and is a little better drained. And then up at the east end of the farm is a Klein gravelly loam. And there is a lot of gravel up there. And that becomes, again, really helpful for drainage, especially in the wet times of the year. We've located the barn up in that section, and as winter comes on and we see more precipitation, we bring the animals back up to the barn and locate their some of the other groups' outdoor infrastructure in 1, 2, and 3, and those can become our sacrifice areas over the winter time. And it just helps minimize the mud that we can experience here. So again, there was no infrastructure on the parcel, and we needed some infrastructure. So 42 by 100 hoop barn was built in that first year. This is 2018. And this was largely modeled after the Rodale Institute. They have an organic hog facility that they've put up a hoop building like this, and have an adjacent heavy use area that allows the animals to bed inside and then have access to the outdoors at all times. We left it's on ecology blocks, and we left some gaps in the ecology blocks so that there's always indoor-outdoor access through those gaps in the ecology blocks. And you'll see in the next slides there what the inside looks like. But essentially we can pen off certain areas on the inside and then have adjacent outdoor areas that allow animals in and out all the time. So a lot of our breeding and farrowing happens in here in the wintertime. Whenever we have harvests. We'll bring the animals out of the field and back up to the barn. And I can talk a little bit more about that later, either for on-farm harvest or transport off of the farm. But it kind of becomes the central hub of the farm. And yeah, some dry space regardless of the weather. We also put up some grain storage tanks acquired from some local dairies, relatively cheap. Hauling them and getting them over here is a little tricky, but otherwise a really important component to the farm system that allows us to store both the grains and legumes that we produce on farm as well as when we purchase in bulk from off farm. There's the inside of the barn in the early years without any petting set up, but you can kind of see some of the gaps in between the blocks there, which we later penned and created alleyways through the different gaps. Some early water infrastructure wagons with IBC totes on top that had nipple waters, that are easily just gravity fed, so you don't need any pumps or electrical things out in the field. You can just move that around, and that became a really easy way for us to move around water across the farm where there was no main line set up yet, and so some of that infrastructure we had to just make very simple and mobile. Here's a view with some penning established, and all of that is mobile. We can swing gates, we can take down those cross gates and set it up. We can take down all the gates if we like. In general, we leave that center aisle open for machines to move in and out, namely a skid steer to bring material into the building and take material out of the building. There's no concrete inside the building, even currently. So we rely on a deep bedding approach to the system. And in this picture, we see a lot of straw. The straw is generated from the byproduct of our grain production primarily. And so we usually put up, 1,000 or so bales every year and then utilize that primarily in the winter time. When the barn is more heavily used. We've also switched over the years to shavings, which we have a local source of shavings that we can bring in bulk, and that becomes a really nice carbon material to bed the animals with in the barn. And so this system in general, we add material to the pens and to the barn until it builds up and it needs to be removed. And that just depends on how many animals are in the barn at any given time. But again, in the winter time, we end up being a little more barn intensive and so a little more material intensive. And in the summertime, less barn intensive as animals are spread out throughout the farm outdoors. And so therefore, less handling of materials in the summer months. I guess what else about the barn? You can kind of see all of the gaps in between the blocks. And so each pen has its own access to the outside. And there's a slab adjacent to the barn, which makes for a nice footing and shedding of water in the winter months. And then there's nipple waters, which aren't in this picture. This looks like it's early on, but there's nipple waters in each of the pens as well. And yeah, it served us pretty well. Let's see here. Early infrastructure, a 12 kilowatt solar system was set up to help offset some of the electrical expenses. This was part of a REAP grant, the Rural Energy for America program. I don't know if that's still around, but at the time had a pretty significant cost share, maybe somewhere around 30%. There wasn't a whole lot of infrastructure when this system went up, so it was designed in anticipation of the electrical loads that were were anticipated. We didn't know exactly, but they've since accumulated the electrical loads and the infrastructure. And at the time, the solar system covered all of the electrical costs on farm, and that's shifted as there's been more electrical demand. And I would say now it's maybe around 75 to 80% of the electricity, which is still very significant and great. Be nice to have some more solar at this point, but really thrilled with this system. And I think that was an overall just good investment. We had that 30% cost share through REAP, and then took an FSA operating loan for the remainder part of this, plus some other infrastructure and equipment things, and that's since been paid off. And so thrilled with that. A couple years later, a main building was constructed, and this provided both a living space or an apartment upstairs, and also was designed so there was a downstairs place of business, essentially. And that's been multifaceted. It served a number of purposes, both from production of our value-added components and office space and seed warehousing, as well as a farm stand, and we've hosted dinners out of that space as well. So that was a great investment. It was a big lift, and we had gone back to the FSA for an additional ownership loan to help cover the cost of construction of that building, but pretty crucial. Kept costs relatively low on all of the infrastructure by doing a lot of the work ourselves and having some wonderful staff that had skills in contracting and construction that made those processes go fairly well. And so currently we operate a farm stand out of that ground floor space, and like I said, it are the manufacturer of our value-added products, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Another key piece of infrastructure is the compost facility or manure handling facility, and this came about in partnership with the NRCS. We had a comprehensive nutrient management plan done for the farm that looked at the number of animals, the amount of manure, the amount of materials that we were bringing in, both with straw that we were producing on site, as well as all the shavings. And a design was created to manage nutrients, specifically in the winter months when the precipitation is such that it's not advised to spread nutrients on your fields because of runoff. And while we created that 180-foot buffer off of the creek to really mitigate any water quality issues, it's still best practice to not spread nitrogen when chances of leaching are high, namely in high precipitation events. So this becomes a space that we can manage all of those materials coming out of the barn when we're more barn-centric in the wintertime, and put them in these bays. So there's 5 bays. They are about 65 yards per bay. The length of the structure is about 75 feet, and it's about 35 feet deep. So the way it works is we have one bay that always is full of clean shavings. Those shavings go into the barn, and like I said, we'll add and deep bed, and then we clean out. And once we fill a bay, one of the nuances of this facility is that it's aerated. And so when the slab was poured, we formed out trenches essentially that are covered with wood, but allow it to be plumbed from the rear side with a blower. And so the blower forces air in through the slab, and we can control which bay the blower is putting air into. But it forces air into the slab and then up through the material such that it becomes an aerated system and an aerobic system instead of an anaerobic system. And this reduces the amount of turning that normally happens in compost making so that you don't end up with an anaerobic system. We allow this just to be a static system for the most part, and turn that air on after a bay's full and let that air, it's on a timer, so it comes on every 20 minutes for like 30 seconds, 20 seconds, not a whole lot, but enough to force air into the pile, stimulate the aerobic microbes, and the temperature heats up then and mitigates pathogens and diseases, and also just stimulates the compost process. After 60 days or so, we usually turn it one time into a free bay and turn the air on that and let it go for another 30 days or so. And at that point, it's ready to spread. So that may be one time over the winter. Usually we have like a cold spell at some point in the winter where the ground's frozen and we can apply to some open ground. Or in the springtime when things are starting to warm up and ground's drying out. But in any case, it's become a really important part of the farm operation. Prior to this, we were using the blower system with 4-inch perforated pipe and just using silage tarps on top of it after we created a pile. It was much more labor intensive. We still use a skid steer all the time, and it's primarily a machine operation, but nonetheless, this is streamlined and made the process, the end product, much better. There's a little video here. Let's see if I can start this. And
all right, morning.
Turn that off. Anyway, you can see the left bay, or that third bay there, we've just turned. Looks like my former dog's on top of that, checking out my work. But that bay was full, and so we've made the one turn that we make, and the air goes onto that through the slab. And this is in winter time, so it's probably gonna, stay there until spring. And then this bay to the right there is clean shavings, and that's what's going into the system. And this is just to the west of our barn. And so I'm standing in the barn taking this video. I'm going to pan to the heavy use area, which we have some finisher hogs here on a free choice feeder with lots of shavings. That's our alleyway down to the compost facility. And then on what would be the south side of the building here, we have some of our gestating sows that have an indoor bedded area, a slab adjacent to it that we can feed them on. So that's the west end of the hoop building, and it goes straight out to the compost facility. So jumping into some other mobile infrastructure here, we've got some outdoor, I think there's a little video too, some outdoor steel huts that are 8x20, and we can move around. Large free choice feeders. All the animals are on free choice feed as they're growing. We use IBC totes that you can see there as waters. They have nipple waters in the side of them, and the animals are trained to that. We run about 25 hogs per paddock. This is in the fall after grain's been harvested on the lower fields. I'll just run through that again. And yeah, the stocking density on this is about 25 per 1 acre, and it just depends on the time of year and how much precipitation there is as far as how long we leave the animals on those areas. So IBC toad over here, nipple waters on it, and what's not easy to see, we keep a hose that runs above ground and goes over to our riser, our mainline riser there, and it's got a float valve in there so that it always stays topped off, or water's always being replaced as the hogs drink it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the types of hogs that we raise, but just wanted to give you an idea of some of the infrastructure. We use 2-string hot wire, the poly wire there, and so this just shows the rebar, 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch rebar with 2 insulators. Put 1 insulator about shin high and 1 about knee high, and depending on the size of the hog. But that's all we've ever used. The heavy use area up by the barn does have a hard fence behind hot wire. Over the years, though, I've found that as long as you maintain a hot fence, the pigs respect it. They're smart creatures. They want to stay with their other pigs. They want to stay in their group. And as long as they have, what they need to be successful, namely shelter, feed, water, and other pigs, they don't want to leave. Sometimes if the grass gets a little greener on the other side, they will get curious about that, and that's usually an indication that it's time to move them. But in general, 2 strands of hot wire that are properly managed has been enough to manage the pigs properly. We've had a couple times where animals get out, and it's generally because they'll root soil onto the lower wire as they get up close to it, and that shorts things out. So it is a daily practice to go out and check the hot wire, but as long as it's managed, we've had a lot of success with that. And then it becomes really easy to make cross fences and set up new paddocks. And so we just use reels and reel out cross fences. We tend to keep our long runs in place, and then just make new paddocks by setting up cross fences. And then as long as you remove the wire, the pig will generally go across into the new paddock. Sometimes because it's a psychological barrier, it takes them a little bit longer. But they tend to move pretty easily. Here's another quick video. Lots of shavings coming in. This looks like it's getting close to winter time. Again, bringing large volumes of shavings in. And what we do is set the huts and the feeders and the waters on those mounds of shavings. Those become the heavy use areas for the hogs. They're constantly trafficking around the hut, the feeder, the water, and so as it rains more, it minimizes the mud around those high impact areas. Here's some sows and some younger pigs. Again, the IBC tote. To the right there is the water. We also use some feeders that are made out of IBC totes. That's a farm builder design. They got real creative and came up with a way that you can orient it on its side like that and build a base so that the feed distributes pretty evenly. So we use some of those. And in the spring, summer, and fall months, hogs are farrowed outside and raised then in groups outside through the duration. Again, some sows with some piglets. We've got our free choice feeders on the pigs. From the time that they're young, we just find it's easier to even allow the sows free choice feed. There's farrowing huts there than trying to feed the sows every day. And so yes, they probably eat a little bit more than they would if we just gave them a standard ration, but the trade-off is just labor, and we found that it's worked really well and helped the young ones grow quickly. Some key equipment that we've acquired and found helpful over the years. There's some grain bins on the left there that, again, we store grain that we grow on site, as well as bulk purchases, and then use a hammer mill, a tractor-driven hammer mill, which is what's to the right there, to crack that grain so it's more digestible for the hog. They have a digestion system much like ourselves, and so the grain and or legume needs to be cracked either with a hammer mill or a roller mill. We found that this hammer mill serves two purposes in that it cracks and mixes our ration, and then we can drive out to the field in order to distribute and refill those feeders instead of bringing everything back up to the barn area. So makes it mobile, makes it pretty easy for us to move feedstock around. There's the mill refilling one of those IBC tote feeders. Tractor pulls it down to the field, and it can just stay in place then and refill. And then on the right is skid steer. That's pretty important part of the operation. I feel like farming is largely moving things around, and the more efficiently you can move things around, the better off you are. And this is the second skid steer we've had, and making that leap to not having a skid steer to having a skid steer was a pretty big change for the better. So yes, this gets used every day. You can, in this case, one of those old Osborne feeders that holds, a ton's worth of food can get picked up and moved around, no problem, and then can swap off and put the bucket on and handle materials out of the compost facility or the barn. I guess other things that we have that, we have all the ground prep equipment, disc, ripper, a cultipacker, a seed drill, all of the ground prep things that are needed. Hogs are hard on the ground, and in the summertime like to make wallows, need to make wallows. They don't sweat, and so their cooling off strategy is to wallow in the mud. So that's, we sometimes have to make wet areas for them when it gets really warm. We don't have a whole lot of tree cover out in our paddocks. We do set up some shade cloth in each of the paddocks adjacent to their shelters, but often they want to wallow, and that results in like little craters in each of the paddocks that need to be flattened out essentially before you can reseed or do anything else in there with equipment, just to get it flat again. So we do have all of those pieces of equipment in order to reseed paddocks, reset paddocks essentially, and grow different forage crops and annual grain crops. So feed production, as noted previously, we've done a lot of annual grain and legume crops over the years, primarily fall planted barley, rye, wheat, and fava beans. The three grains do fairly well fall planted here and don't freeze out. The fava can be hit and miss if it gets really cold and it's exposed. But in general, fall planting works really well. We use organic practices. We're not certified organic anymore. We had been for a number of years, but pivoted over to an animal welfare approved certification. Nonetheless, we manage our ground organically. And so the fall planting helps the crop get established and outcompete spring weeds, which is a little more challenging if you spring plant. So lower 20 acres tends to be that cropping area where we'll do that grain, fall plant it after the animals have come off of there, and then it grows through the summer months, and then we contract with a neighbor farm to combine it. There's some fava beans, and they combine fava as well for us. And there's the combine there. That is a piece of equipment we don't have to own. So we're really grateful for, again, that community of farmers that share equipment. So we pay them to come combine it. and from the combine empty into a grain cart and hustle that up to our grain storage bins. And then from there, we can feed that out through our mill throughout the years. Throughout the year. After it's combined, we square bale the straw, and that becomes bedding for the animals, and or we sell some of that throughout the year as well. Pasture forages, we use a mix of grasses, legumes, and small grains, and try to get those established in the fall as we've moved animals off of those lower areas, and then move them back on in the spring as vegetative growth really takes off and they forage through those things. I mean, hogs in general, they're not ruminants, so they're not necessarily benefiting off of forage crops that much. A lot of people think you can just put hogs out on pasture like you would a cow or another ruminant, and they're going to grow, and that's not really the case. They need protein sources that they're going to get from grains and legumes. Again, their digestive system much like ours. So while they like to browse through these things, and there's been plenty of studies that have shown that especially the older animals, the sows and boars, can get nutritional benefit from forage crops on pasture. The younger ones, they're putting on body mass from a protein conversion that comes from their feed source, which the grain and legume is the primary. And so that's why we always do free choice feed that we're providing them. And we think of the pasture situation as just a supplemental feed that is providing, their ability to express hog behaviors of rooting around. And there's certainly all kinds of grubs and worms and things that they like to get after. And again, benefit a small amount from the pasture vegetation, but the primary source of nutrition is coming from the grain and legume ration that we're making and that they have free choice access to. Staff, so couldn't do it without some really great people throughout the years. It continues to surprise me when folks show up and say they want to work at a pig farm, but nonetheless, they keep showing up, and I'm always like, okay. So, it's been a really mixed crew over the years. We, in general, have always had 2 to 3 part-time staff to help across the animal husbandry and management, some of the horticulture endeavors, and then the marketing and sales. And during the infrastructure building time, we had some folks like Andrew in the top left corner that was much more interested in building his construction skills. He went on to start a general contracting business. We've got Curtis in the center who had culinary skills, and brought that to the team. We did some dinners while Curtis was here, and he went on to be a culinary instructor at the local community college. We've had high school students. We have a high school nearby that has a pig barn, and so we've had high school students that are interested in getting paid to use their hog skills. And those are unique skills when people have experience being around hogs, understanding the hog psychology. And so it's been great that folks continue to show up and are interested in working with us. And generally they work a couple years, and maybe move on. And that's fine. And we've had people just generally interested in regenerative agriculture and incorporating livestock into a land base. So it's been great to have supportive staff over the years, and we've learned a lot managing staff, and they've certainly shared a lot with us and helped us grow. Current farrow to finish. So we started as primarily a buying piglets in, raising them up, and then finishing them in the fall. We're now farrow to finish, closed herd, Berkshire boar. We have 2 boars at this point and 18 sows, and are doing all the breeding on site, occasional artificial insemination to bring in some new genetics, but really like the Berkshire carcass, the way it ends up, and really like the old spot, Gloucester old spot. And so a lot of our sows are a mix between Berk and old spot, and find that there's some hybrid vigor when you crossbreed like that. Litter size ends up being a little bit larger. Here's some sows here. We use farrowing huts in the spring, summer, and fall, and these huts allow the pig to come and go, unlike a farrowing crate that immobilizes the sow. She can come and go. That's the inside of the hut on the left. It's got bumpers so the babies can get out of the way, and in the back behind that plywood we can hang a heat lamp in the cold. These huts are mobile, so we can pick them up and move them to a new paddock. We tend to nurse for 8 weeks. You know, the gestation period is 4 months, and then you've got piglets on the sow for 2 months. So that's 6 months. They come back into heat once you wean them, 5 to 7 days later. We try to breed them back as long as body condition's good. So, on paper, it suggests that you could get 2 litters a year. It just never works out that way. And so I'd say 1.5 litters per year is the average. I've got sows that will have 16 babies. I have sows that'll have 9 babies. It always seems like those sows that have 16, there's some stillborns in there, and you just never wean as many as you would like. We probably average 8 to 9 weaning per sow with 1.5 litters per year. We are animal welfare approved. I talked a little bit about that. Chose that. We really like the standards, the animal welfare standards that it has in place. Had been organic, certified organic through Oregon Tilth for a couple of years, and felt like that certification really emphasizes inputs, as opposed to the animal welfare approved focuses more on the animal welfare, both in the production side and on farm, but also at slaughter. So they inspect our butcher as well. And that's really worked for us, the certification. And I think it really works for our customers too. They seem to respond to this certification fairly well. It's stamped on our label with our logo, and so that goes to all of our sales outlets, and we try to promote that, and believe in that third-party certification as an appropriate one for our operation. As far as our butcher goes, this is a key component to small livestock operation. We are fortunate to have a USDA butcher that for many years was mobile, and so we're seeing that mobile trailer on our compost slab there, the apron slab. We used to do on-farm slaughter, and the USDA inspector just inspecting there in the white coat, and we would clear out one of those bays and bring our finished hogs down into that bay, and then the day before the slaughter and the next day the truck would pull up with the inspector. We'd harvest up to 15 a day. Was an 8-hour day, and then they would go back to their plant for cut and wrap under inspection. The Island Grown Farmers Cooperative has since stopped utilizing that mobile processing unit, and they built a new facility, kill floor, at their brick and mortar facility just about 45 minutes south of us. So we currently trailer animals that 45 minutes, and we're harvesting 10 to 15 hogs every month is essentially our rotation. So we have a date on their calendar every month. They do all of the primary butchering, but they do not have any secondary butcher services like smoking and curing. So we use Jack Mountain Meats, which is also a USDA facility, and they're very close to Island Grown, but we use them for our bellies to get cured into bacon. It's a bit of a precarious situation, that butcher thing, and there's been some recent discussion about it maybe not being around in the near future, so I'm always a little worried about that. But they do a great job currently, and it ends up highlighting our product in a really nice way with our alluvial label on there in vacuum sealed packages. So some of our marketing and sales outlets, from the retail side, we're year-round vendors at the Bellingham Farmers Market. Here's a booth with a former staff working, and this is every Saturday, April through December, and then once a month, January, February, March. Super supportive community, and yeah, really well-attended market. And it's only 25 minutes from the farm, so it makes a lot of sense for us to go here, and we sell a lot of product through this market. We also have an on-farm stand at the farm on the porch. As I was pointing out earlier, we have a couple retail freezers and sell all of our cuts out of there, as well as some partner farm products. We sell sauerkraut, we resell eggs and honey, and have some business relationships with those producers, and they complement the pork real well. It's self-serve, honor system. It's open dawn to dusk, and so far it's been great. We really respect the community that comes here, and everybody's respected the honor system, and it's allowed us not to have a staff there all the time. We do bulk shares, custom quarters, halves, and wholes, as well as a subscription service that acts a lot like a CSA, and these are other direct-to-consumer outlets that are primary sales channels for us. We've standardized the custom quarter, half, and wholes. It's just standardized so they get the same quantities and cuts. There's a little bit of customization in there, but more or less it's standardized so that streamlines the communication with the butcher. We handle all the communication with the butcher, and so the buyer pays us and not the butcher. We pay the butcher, and I think that makes it a lot easier on both the butcher and the customer. Some of our wholesale outlets, we're part of the Puget Sound Food Hub, which is a farmer cooperative that aggregates and distributes up and down the I-5 corridor and increases access to larger grocery stores and some restaurants in the Seattle area. The Community Food Co-op in Bellingham has been a huge supporter over the years and buys year-round our product. Places like the Rome store, which is a small grocery outlet in our community, and some other farmers markets that resell our product, our sales channels as well. Value-added products, that was something we identified as an area of opportunity. We do an ointment, or a skincare product, as we like to call it, where we render the fat, mix it with beeswax, and add essential oils, package it up. We have a lip balm, and we have some tins and tubs, and resell that. It's been kind of challenging to get people on board to put lard on themselves. I think there's an initial aversion to that, but it's a great product and allows us to get some more dollars for that fat that we're already paying the butcher to handle. We also do a pet treat product that is the liver. The primary ingredient is the liver from the hogs that we raise, and we mix it with garbanzo bean flour. We put it in a dehydrator. Here's some pictures there. The liver, garbanzo bean flour on the left. We mix it, blend it, and then put it into these silicone molds. We have a commercial dehydrator in that downstairs space, and then package it up nicely and sell that primarily wholesale. I mean, we do sell it at the farmer's market, but a lot more so at pet shops and other outlets that are interested in selling local goods. Some other income that we have is pumpkins. We do an acre of pumpkins, you pick, and then put the hogs on them. After October's over, we sell some pumpkins wholesale. And that's been a nice way just to open the doors and get people onto the farm. Try to be super transparent. let people come out, check out what's going on so they can see firsthand. And that often just ends up being a really good selling point and a way to build more customers. We also have an acre of grapes that was a wild hair idea a number of years back. Nonetheless, we put it in. It's this varietal called Jupiter. It had been going to a winemaker. That winemaker is No Mas, and so now you pick this and wholesale these through the food hub as well. And it just adds up to some fall income. I guess I should say also that we warehouse some seed for another company, and we have some rentals on farm as well. And that in total adds up to the bulk of the Alluvial Farms business. Yeah, there we are. It kind of comes to the close. It's 12:30. How'd I do on time, Evan?
Doing great.
I'm happy to keep talking. I just wanted to be mindful of a 12:30 cutoff. Is that indeed when it is, or is there more
Uh,
time?
let's see. It's no, we actually have until 12:45, so there's some time
Oh,
to
great.
finish up and answer any questions as well. So, yeah, you're good.
Cool. Well, maybe I'd go back. I feel like I rushed through these last value-added components a little bit, which directly tie into the profitability or just ways to think about, uh, you know, getting more money out of the carcass, which meat is definitely our primary, and that's where the lion's share of the revenue is coming from. But again, I mentioned, you're paying the butcher to handle a carcass, and at the end of the day, fat ends up being a significant percentage of that. I mean, we try not to get our animals too fatty, right? There's a happy medium there with an overconditioned animal going to the butcher and enough fat on the carcass that it's going to provide that intermuscular fat that really lends to flavor and what the customer that's buying the meat at the end of the day wants. They want something. We found that the customers we've had really appreciate a little bit of fat on their pork chops, in their roasts, etc., so that it's a different flavor than what they're getting from lean pork at the grocery store. So trying to balance those things, you end up with some back fat, you end up with some leaf lard that comes out of the belly. And we certainly have some customers that purchase that fat from us in small quantities. And we also render that fat and put it into jars and sell it as a cooking oil, which we can't wholesale that, but we can certainly do that in a commercial kitchen and sell that as like a custom exempt product, which is direct to the consumer at the farmer's market or off the farm stand. And so that works really well with us, but we're still end up with a lot of fat afterwards. And so along the way, we thought, well, geez, people have been using fats as a salve or a skincare product for a long time, for many generations. And we've certainly gotten away from that, in the more contemporary time. But we thought we would try. And at one point, we had been growing hemp on the farm for CBD. And so that was a primary ingredient in the salve products, was adding the rendered fat, the beeswax, and then these essential oils, lavender, mint, and we had been doing CBD oil from hemp that we were growing on farm. It became really challenging with regulations to deal with the hemp situation, not so much from the government, which I would have thought would have been the case. That was fairly straightforward with the 2018 Farm Bill legalizing hemp and state agencies like the WSDA having a pathway to get a hemp license and testing and all those things, and we were really compliant with all of that. But we found that some of the private vendors that we worked with, namely QuickBooks and our website host platform, did internal audits unbeknownst to us and saw that hemp was a part of the business and kind of classified it the same as THC cannabis, and just flagged us, and made it really tricky. And so at the end of the day, we just nixed that enterprise altogether, but maintained the ointment minus the CBD. And so it's been a slow burn, no doubt, and it's a good product. I think just the mental side, helping people get over the mental hurdle of putting lard on themselves is the main thing. So we had a SARE grant for a while to help identify those hurdles, those challenges, the language around the branding in order to help people get over that hurdle, as well as adjust the price points so that it was within the wheelhouse of the consumers who were interested in this. And some of that helped. I would say that more than anything, that the recent interest in tallow has spurred an interest in our lard-based ointment. And so we've been trying to ride the coattails of that, and I continue to hope that it'll take off a little faster or a little more strongly than it has been. But I mean, from an enterprise standpoint, the margin makes sense. It definitely makes sense to try to capture some dollars off of this part of the carcass. Same with the pet treats. And this one has been way easier. People love to spend money on their animals, and maybe more so than themselves. I don't know. That's an interesting one. But we end up with all this organ meat. It's true that we don't have a culture that eats a whole lot of organ meat, despite it being really good for you. It's USDA inspected, human grade liver that we're getting back from the butcher, and again, paying the butcher to handle, and tried to sell it just as a frozen product alongside our meat products for a long time. And it just wasn't doing it, and found ourselves having to compost a lot of it because it was sitting in the freezer for too long, and that's discouraging. And I think the watershed moment here came when there was a mailer that it was sent out by the county, and the context was water quality. And they basically said, like, on their little postcard, there's 50,000 dogs in Whatcom County. Clean up after your dog. And I was like, wow, 50,000 dogs in our county alone. That's crazy. That's like one dog for every 5 people. It's a lot. And here we are with all of these organ meats that are so popular with pet owners. And so that's really where that came from. And again, allows us to add some value to what otherwise is not producing any revenue for us, or wasn't producing revenue enough to cover the cost of us having that product handled. And so that feels really good at this point. That's definitely more of a wholesale channel product and enterprise. And that's worked really well for us to have a lower price point for that, but move more in volume. And it was a nice legacy project there for my friend, Mr. Trout, who's on the right. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to maybe talk about. There's other events we've done over the years. We've tried the on-farm dinners. It kind of worked. So it's a whole nother thing though. And I think there's a balance between staying focused on enterprises that can produce revenue, consistent revenue for you, and not getting distracted with all the other possibilities that are out there. And it's a fine line trying to determine what's a good opportunity to explore and what's just noise. And we certainly have learned a lot from some of the opportunities that we explored. But, hindsight's 2020, and you look back and you're like, I wonder if we just stayed more focused, if that would have paid a better dividend than having explored this, that, or the other. So, on-farm events, great, helps increase exposure to the community. And again, I think that has been a a strategy that has paid dividends for building a brand and a name in the community, is just trying to open your doors as much as possible and have people come check out the situation and talk it through with them. I get people regularly that stop in and they're just like, wow, I've not seen this maybe ever, where hogs are outside, or systems that are set up the way we've got them set up. And it's too bad, because it wasn't too long ago. I mean, we're not doing anything revolutionary. This is what people were doing in the 40s and 50s. And so, certainly with confinement operations, we've gotten away from smaller scale meat production that is in a better harmony with the land and with the people. And it's great to see the responses of the community. So I think that's been a really important part of growing the business. In addition to just providing a great product, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to have a good product that your customer is going to come back for, and that, I think, speaks to both your production system and the way you are raising the hog in an outdoor environment with good feedstocks and the proper genetics and all of those things that go into production, as well as your butcher, that they are doing a top-notch job of cutting and wrapping your product, and it's being presented to the public in a way that matches how much care you put into producing it. I think I'm good there. It gives us 5 minutes to answer any questions, if people have any questions or want me to expand on anything else. I see Sophia in Bainbridge Island. Just a shout out. Thanks, Sophia. Stop by sometime. You're not too far away. If anybody else in attendance has any other thoughts or clarifying questions, happy to take those.
Not seeing any questions, but I guess I'll ask a question in
Yeah.
terms of you know your decisions around scaling up an infrastructure cost. I'd be curious to know about how you made those decisions, because obviously it looks like you kind of started with just sort of a bare bones operation there, and then you made a lot of investments in some of that infrastructure, the equipment. And I'm wondering, how fast did you scale up? How did you decide to make those investments, and did you decide to wait on any of those investments? And yeah, how did that decision-making process play out?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we started pretty bare bones, raw land. That's a lot of heavy lifting to build infrastructure. I don't know if that's the best move. In hindsight, a lot of energy goes into that, as opposed to, like really refining a production system. I guess the trade-off is you can kind of design things the way you think it'll best suit your anticipated production systems. So there's that whole like energy investment component there that is certainly worth scrutinizing if you're starting a new farm business. I have friends that bought existing farms and had a lot of infrastructure that needed a lot of attention, right? And so they wish that they had newer infrastructure, which I suppose after building it now, the infrastructure at Alluvial is relatively new. As far as the money goes, I mean, there was certainly a time where off-farm income was helping support the business and the development. And then I guess I would, and that cut off many years ago, and alluvial is my sole source of income at this point, as modest as it is, but the business does pay me, and yeah, I'm happy with the quality of life that I maintain. The major infrastructure investments, I'm super grateful for the FSA's ownership and operating loan programs that they have. And I would highly encourage anyone that needs financing to explore those options. The terms are super favorable, they're like 40 years, and the interest rates are generally better than you're going to get anywhere else. And they understand, they'll set up payment plans so that it matches your revenue stream, which isn't necessarily a once a month payment. It could be a once a year payment or a once every 6 month payment. And I think that offers some flexibility in the mind to grow a business. So yeah, those are the ways that we did it. And I would, I continue to lean on FSA and think it's an excellent source. I mean, the other areas that you have to leverage, and you got to leverage them all, is there's a lot of grant opportunities out there and programs, private and public, that have funds to help new businesses get started, whether that's the value-added producer grant. You know, there's money out there, and you kind of have to be savvy and go find it, and get after it. But yeah, you got to leverage your resources. I don't know, in hindsight, I kind of skimped by with older used equipment at first because I was reluctant to take on more debt. And I wonder if that, again, was not the right move. I eventually got to newer equipment, tractor and skid steer, not new, but certainly the tools that I need and that work really well. Whereas starting with more affordable pieces of equipment early on, at least from a cash standpoint, didn't necessarily set me up to have pieces of equipment that were doing what I needed. And so you wonder about that, like, well, if I would have, just from the get-go taken on more debt and got those pieces of equipment, would it have accelerated the business growth earlier? And I don't know what the answer is in hindsight. I just know that's what I did, and I think it's worth talking through, as talking through the trade-offs always as you navigate having to make those investment decisions. And I think as your business grows and your experience grows, you make different decisions, and maybe I would make different decisions now, having known what I know. But that's of course neither here nor there. So
Sure. Well, I'm seeing some thanks for you in the chat, and just wanted to really appreciate you for joining us today, chatting about your operation, being so generous with your experiences. I hope folks at home got a lot out of today's presentation. It is being recorded. We'll throw it up online as well, so you can share it with other hog curious farmers out there. But with that, we're going to head on out, and we hope folks will join us at the next workshop here at the California Small Farm Conference, and we will see you soon.